It's time for the Access of Easy podcast, the weekly technology digest that keeps you ahead of the curve. Brought to you by EasyDNS.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Access of Easy. This is the audio or video compendium to the weekly Access of Easy newsletter, brought to you as always by EasyDNS. My name is Joey. That in the other panel is Len. What is going on, buddy? A grinding Thursday. We've just been talking before we went on air here. Busy day. Things are going okay over there otherwise, though?
Yeah, and just racking my brain to see who else could compete against Patrick Waugh in terms of no, everything is good.
Broder, right, for sure.
But he didn't do it with any other team. If you look at, I mean, you're right. It was different decades. Now this is we're talking about a subject we didn't even
didn't introduce at all.
We'll just leave it alone. Broder did it in 2 decades.
Yeah, I would say Broder and Fuhr maybe, but anyway,
Fuhr never won it after the 80s.
But is he the best? Like as far as the best goalie of all time?
It's debatable. I loved Grant Fuhr, especially with the Oilers. And when the Leafs traded for him, I was so happy. The Leafs were terrible, but I'm a huge Grant Fuhr fan. But you can't discount what Broder has done.
I know
Patrick Roy, what he has done. So these guys are just legends. And there's guys I've never seen, like Dryden.
Yeah, Jacques Plante. Yeah.
So I can't say anything about those guys, but I loved Fuhr. He was so good. They just let him off the drive, basically. You know, don't worry, give up 4 goals, we'll score 5. But you shut the door for that 5th goal, and Grant was there. But
that's right.
I love Grant.
Oh man, this is number 339. So let's start as always with the quote. Last week we'll go with to begin here. There is nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed. They were looking for Ernest Hemingway as the answer, and Tom got it first. Congrats to Tom for that. This week's quote: find a place inside where there's joy, and the joy will burn out the pain. Who's that by? Eddie Vedder, Pearl Jam? Sounds like a Pearl Jam lyric.
I was going to say something with, well, leave it at that.
Modern poet Eddie Vedder. If you know, put it in the comments. Don't Google it. You know the rules. Don't mess up the process here. And you get your next round of renewals on EasyDNS. Len, we got a handful of stories today. The latest and greatest in data breach and overreaching. Where do you want to start, my friend?
Well, this story from Charles Hugh Smith. And, this guy apparently sat in our chairs as the host of the Access of Easy. I was not aware. Who is Charles Hugh Smith? He's preliminarily known as an author. He's written many, many books. It looks like 10 or so when I checked the website. Anyways, he has a Substack. And on his Substack, as an author, he likes to write, and he does so on his Substack. He wrote an interesting piece on February 24th, just last week, and it was titled, It's Never Been Easier to Be Scammed, Deception in the Era of AI. And in it, he talks about a few ways people try to scam others, but one particular way that has been done is probably using AI to do it. And in his Substack article, he's mentioning another author called Cory Doctorow. And Cory submitted a story to Charles about being duped. And in this email, in this story, he received an email. So the author that wrote to the author that's in this story, he received an email from an agent expressing interest in one of his books. And he did like anybody else would do. He tried to go through Google, look to see what's going on with this agency and this person. And everything came up rosy. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. And the agent even sent some legit looking submission guidelines from a big publishing house and even a sample contract. They arranged a call. They chatted for quite some time. They had a lengthy discussion about a variety of topics. And in the end, the con was revealed. Now, through this discussion, it just seems that red flags came up and it caused some concerns. So one of the problems was it was a suggestion that they both needed to outsource the submission preparation and split the costs. And this raised concerns even further. And then he had to look into this a little bit further. And sure enough, the agency website, which he was originally forwarded, was fake. It included a URL with a dash in it. And it looked like another agency that was actually legitimate. And when you compared it to, just that one minute little detail directs you to a totally different website that provides information and shows this scam agent guy to be, well, trying to dupe him. So it just goes to show you, even people in the know, even people that are aware and trying to do their due diligence to see if something is indeed a scam, just overlooking one thing, and in this case, one little thing, a dash, was enough to open the doors to potentially have been duped. Good thing this guy still was able to ask questions and continually ask questions. His guard was up through the whole discussion. But how many people are not like him? And I would imagine some of this might be developed with AI to help ease the process for developing a fake website that looks like something else, phishing attempts and everything. So just be on your guard, more so now than ever before.
This is pretty wild. I don't want to like go too deep on your sort of security methods, but I'm curious because we do the show obviously a lot and we hear a bunch in Bitcoin and through Access of Easy about all these different scams and cons. And obviously we've discussed at length at this point the nature of AI and what's coming down the pipeline here in terms of ubiquity, like Charles says. Do you have like a safe word or like a way for your wife or daughter to identify whether it is actually you on the phone and not an AI chatbot? I mean, you think about the sampling of our voices that are online at this point, it's hundreds of hours, if not thousands, between all the interviews and shows we've done in the last 3 years. I think it's time to set something like that up because you have parents or children or spouse or friends or colleagues even that, you may wind up talking to vis-a-vis a chatbot, sometimes even in voice. And there's just no way to identify in a pinch or when there's an emotional bomb that comes with it, as Charles mentions here, right? This like this foundation of a con. Danger is one of them. Your spouse has been kidnapped, your child's in danger, whatever. These are really difficult things to deal with. And it's another example of technology advancing at such a rapid pace. Humans are just not meant to adapt this quickly, Len. We've talked about this a lot from the sort of the side of privacy and whatnot. And we'll talk about that again tonight. But to me, this is bad. There's so many people who are vulnerable to this kind of thing still, of all ages, by the way, not just, guys like you and me. I'm young enough to have watched Catfish on MTV only 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a little longer now, I guess, where people are convinced that a person on the other end of a Facebook message is a real woman or man. Turns out it's just some guy who, is conning you, wants to embarrass you or steal from you. These people are out there still. They haven't disappeared. And the means available to scammers have become so sharp and readily available that, yeah, I expect, much like, Charles's Substack says, I expect the use to go parabolic. Crazy stuff, isn't it? Like, would you ever consider like a safe word? Like, how do you, I mean, we're maybe not quite there yet, but like we're getting close, aren't we? It feels like we are.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it. That's actually a good idea.
Yeah.
I should definitely put that in. Yeah. My daughter doesn't have a phone. So
right. Good for you.
Yet. Anyways, let's move on because Reuters is reporting this past week that the Change Healthcare, well, they were subjected to a hack. And they are a provider of revenue and payment cycle management that connects payers, providers, and patients within the U.S. healthcare system. Now, this is very important here because just on the surface, by looking at what it is that they deal with, any sort of potential hack or legitimate attack, well, you can see how bad things could really get. And it was determined that what they call a suspected nation state associated cybersecurity threat actor who was involved with this attack. So immediately what, it seems kind of vague, but what comes to mind is North Korea, Iran. These are two things, but may not be the case. And I'll explain why. So upon finding out that outsiders gained access to the systems, Change Healthcare decided to disconnect their system from the network. And this is a very prudent thing to do. And at which point they assessed the damages. It was determined that what was done was, unfortunately, information was stolen. And according to this Reuters article, nothing was confirmed about what was stolen. But the immediate impact here, some disruption of service that impacted clients nationwide. But on a broader scale, you got to think about all the information that they had. Those people that were waiting for a few extra hours for their subscription to be filled, that's a nuisance. But the people getting their information stolen, that's pretty scary, especially when you're talking about medical history. Now, I can add a little bit more color because, it turned out 2 days ago there was some additional information to this story. A ransomware group that stole the information have claimed to have stolen 6 terabytes worth of data here.
Is that a lot?
And that is a significant amount. 6 terabytes. The whole Bitcoin blockchain is 500 and something terabyte. That's every anyways. So they say what has been stolen is thousands of healthcare providers, insurance providers, pharmacies, and so forth. So they claim to have secured the following: medical records, insurance records, dental records, payment information, claims information, patients' PII data. That's the phone numbers, addresses, social security numbers, email addresses, and more.
Personal identifying information, right? I think that's the, yeah.
And the last thing they say, the active U.S. military and Navy personnel data. Now, given what's been stolen, the amount of data, 6 terabytes, I'm pretty sure it's been compressed as well. They have to give out something. What is it going to be? The token 1 year worth of right? Like that's what it's going to be, right? But really, in the end, is we individuals we can't get around this. We need medical assistance. We have to use these companies. We got to use these services. We have to give up our information. There is no way around it. Unfortunately, it is inherent on the people that have that information to try their level best to make sure that we don't get wrecked in the process. But in this case, people did, unfortunately. It's going to happen more and more because this is a honeypot worth of information here. And it's going to be, well, not so easy, but if you do manage to get it, I'll leave it at that. It's pretty damning stuff.
How many times have we seen medical institutions, medical databases, the subject of a story on Access of Easy the last 2 months? Five
like
times, 4 times, pretty much, right? Yeah, half the time. So yeah, you're right. It's going to happen more. It's already starting to happen more. I'm not going to add too much to this because we have talked about this at length over the year or so we've been doing the show. But I just want to note that doesn't it make you sick that in America and here too, I guess, the outrageous kind of cost of the healthcare system doesn't really come from the treatment and the medical professionals, but rather the administrative burden and the administrative bureaucracy that just continues to fester and grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And you're told as a citizen of either of these countries, probably European countries the same way, that you need this bureaucracy to continue to administer the healthcare program at such a high level. I'm putting air quotes around high. And if you don't have that, then you're not going to get the same quality of service. What quality are you getting exactly as far as the administrative benefits here, for example? Presumably part of that cost is security and IT services and whatnot. You got pwned, man, to the tune of 6 terabytes. I mean, if that's text files, presumably it is, we're talking millions of names, millions of individual bits of information. You're going through some kind of treatment for an illness and you find out that, on top of the nausea from the meds, you're also going to be having to change your identity and your social insurance number and whatnot in the next little while and going through all that. Thanks for coming. Here's your, $6,000 bill. Shameful. It's shameful. And to your point, it's going to continue to happen because these are cruise liners, man. These operations are, as Mark aptly says, they're in technical deficit. They're building on top of systems because they just can't have the system go down for any length of time. And now you're starting to see the consequences of that. And it's popping up everywhere. I expect it to continue. You are your only advocate when it comes to your personal data, whether it's, in healthcare or anywhere else. So stay tuned for more stories like this next week and every week here on Access of Easy.
It's never ending. Get your popcorn ready because there's an ongoing struggle right now to define the boundaries of free speech. And this is all because of what's going on in the digital age. And the Supreme Court is now trying to figure out how to deal with a complex legal battle that's concerning regulation of social media content moderation. Now, this all stems between 2 state laws, and that is being investigated by the court. And these laws seek to empower the individual states to establish their own rules governing how social media platforms are going to be dealing with things. So at the heart of this is the debate about the fundamental question of whether these states, the regulations infringe on the First Amendment, the guarantee of free speech. And traditionally, the First Amendment serves as a safeguard against government censorship. but the application in the context of privately owned social media platforms, this creates a whole new challenge, and it's going to be testing the First Amendment laws. And the justices of the Supreme Court, they're wrestling now with the question whether to uphold the principle of free speech while at the same time trying to acknowledge the potential harms associated with unfettered online access. This is all part of 2024. I forgot what year we're in. As you can see, things are just changing so much so quickly. And I have my popcorn ready. I hope you have yours too, because they're exploring both the arguments here by both sides and the various considerations that they're taking into consideration here. So it just shows that the tensions between the First Amendment protection and also the negative consequences of trying to adhere to the other side of the argument. And the interesting thing is the Supreme Court is stacked with, not stacked. Trump swayed the balance a certain way since he was able to. And I'm going to go into the weeds here. That decision is going to have a lasting effect for decades. And that was one of the most important things that he's done when he was president. I'm wondering if the people that he put in there is going to be able to, because it's basically swaying one direction, is this going to make the decision go one way or another simply because of the people that he put in the Supreme Court?
Okay, so this to me is an interesting topic because it does discuss Section 230, which is basically this publisher versus platform law that the states had many years ago, back in the age of horse and buggy, basically. And it's sort of modern day application to social media networks. Whether or not a social media network is a platform where people can post, and the social media network is not responsible for the content, nor are they responsible for things like takedowns and whatnot, and making sure that the posts meet a certain criteria. Or are they publishers where they are in fact the people who quote unquote publish the information and should be responsible for its content, whether or not that's extreme on the back end vis-a-vis the consequences or not. I'm going to plug a guy who we know, Len. We had him on CBP a little while back. I don't know if you were on that interview or it was just me. You remember Preston Byrne?
Yeah, I was there. The lawyer from Massachusetts?
He's a partner at Anderson Kiln. And if you just go to his Twitter feed, I was looking here for a good link on his Twitter feed, but it's easier to search on my phone, which is out of arm's reach, unfortunately. But go to his Twitter feed and just type in Section 230 or just the numbers 230. He's done a number of posts on this over the years because he has the view that these guys are just not ever going to be responsible for this and shouldn't be. And I think I share that view, even though I'm not, legally oriented, as it were. But I can't imagine that, the Supreme Court is going to think that publishers should somehow be responsible, or these social media platforms be responsible. Now, when it comes to stuff like censorship and, the stuff about Trump and all this other, this is like, is this not purely political at this point? It seems to me like these guys can't make a decision outside of their politics. The Supreme Court often votes with the president who elected them in terms of the party that they support during certain legislation. That's not the intention, obviously, nor is it the best outcome in my view, but it seems to happen more frequently than not. And I look at this and think, why is it going to change? These guys, everything has become so politicized now that there is no alternative besides voting party lines for some of these things. And I believe this is one of those subjects. What do you think?
Potentially. And it may go to show just even something like free speech and First Amendment, how you could use it in a digital age. And it seems like these things need to be modernized in some way, shape, or form.
It's hard.
And I know the First Amendment is very broad and everything, but still, when you're dealing with online, it's encroaching somewhere else, which obviously was never intended with the First Amendment, and they would never have figured it out, thought about it when they drafted up that amendment. But still, this is going to have implications down the road. However it is that is going to be, they're going to be swaying this decision one way or another. I don't know. This is interesting. Like I said, I have my popcorn ready, and I don't even know which way it's going to go. I have no clue.
No, me neither. It's so supercharged. I think it's worth mentioning in the same vein. Why don't we talk about the the Online Harms Act, and maybe we can lock in the two stories together a little bit, because there's some similarities between the two in terms of what the expected outcome might be.
I'm going to give a very broad and general overlook
Okay.
of what's going on here. So Bill C-63, that's what it
Yes.
is. And it's called the Online Harms Act. And the goal of this bill is to impose harsher sentences for spreading hate crimes on the internet.
Hate
And
speech,
this
right? That's what they're calling it, I believe. Hate crimes or hate speech?
hate crimes is what I'm getting from. It's not
Okay.
just speech, but it goes even beyond that. And they're saying they're going to be amending the criminal code to encompass these new changes.
Mm-hmm.
And so how this is going to be done is rather interesting, because the government is going to be creating a 5-person digital safety commission. And this commission will have the power to get content scrubbed from the internet that they deem to be against the spirit of the law. And also of note is that the social media platforms will be tasked to remove content within 24 hours of a complaint being filed or faced stiff penalties. And Facebook or Meta, or whatever you want to call them these days, they say they're on board with this. So at the very least, you have one of the big players it's going to comply with this request. And in terms of getting this through Parliament, because this is something that's being presented by a Liberal in the House of Commons, it's a minority government,
Mm-hmm.
this should pass because they have the numbers. The Liberals obviously are going to back it. The NDP have said they're going to be agreeing with it as well. They're going to back it as well. So those two are enough to push this through the House of Commons, regardless if the remaining members say they don't like it. So just based on that, this is a very early test by me. This is going to pass through the House of Commons with flying colors. There should not be much resistance. And depending what happens at committee or even at the Senate, I suspect this is probably going to become law in the not too distant future.
What can you really say about this?
There's not much. I mean, it is what it is.
I'm concerned about the direction of this, obviously. The story that's come out since, now that we've had a chance to read this, and I suspect that Professor Geist, whose article we have for the Access of Easy website and for the newsletter this week, you should read it and listen to his podcast on it too, which I expect to come out tomorrow. The thing that's come out since then is that the Justice Minister is sort of retaining this power to place under house arrest someone who is feared to commit a hate crime in the future, even if they have not yet done so already. That's in the Globe and Mail. That's not, Joey and Len saying that. That's a Globe and Mail report by Marie Wolf, who's a reporter for them. I am troubled by the direction. I'm troubled by the scope, and I'm troubled by the idea that 5 people, presumably appointed by the current sort of government administration, are going to be responsible for deciding whether or not something needs to be taken down. My bigger concern, Len, is that I'm going to lose access to services like Twitter and other social media networks, search engines, and the like, because as we've discussed in the past, we're just such a small market that it's not worth the $100 million, $150 million a year to administer that cost in order to keep the service running in Canada, which is becoming, I think, rather quickly a hostile environment to tech companies, especially those from other jurisdictions. So all of this is very concerning. I'll be keeping a close eye. I would love to talk to Professor Geist on this show or on CBP about this bill, because I think he's very level-headed. I believe he has done a great job reviewing this stuff and outlining some of the key concerns, and he does it impartially. He's very nonpartisan, and I've appreciated that kind of commentary, where it's very rare these days to find nonpartisan commentary. So let's see where this goes. Again, I feel like I'm saying that a lot with the end of these stories, but everything's happening pretty quick now. And to go through something like this, a legislative change of this nature without considering second order effects, I think is a dicey avenue. And I'm a little worried. I gotta be honest with you. This one is a little concerning to me more than most.
I'll leave it at that. There's a story that is, it's about recreating fingerprints for smartphones and trying to gain access to it. Now, this story, I mean, just on the surface makes sense. Now, I've been thinking about this quite a bit. We touch our phones, our fingerprints are on there. I always thought it would be possible to manipulate the fingerprints that we put on there and get that to access the data on our phone. But it looks like this has happened, but through a different way. which is very, very interesting. So it's a new hacking technique called Print Listener, and it's been developed by researchers. And this is a method where hackers can steal fingerprints simply by listening to the sound of someone swiping their finger across a touchscreen. I initially thought, this is interesting, but it's also kind of messed up because they're using the microphone that is embedded within, or the microphones embedded within the phone itself, the smartphone, to basically steal the sound and to try to render what it is the fingerprint actually looks like. And man, you got to think about the major security risks surrounding this if someone's able to tap into this potential information. And, especially considering how many fingerprints we use on, I know people that use it for like banking apps, not just their phone, but so many other things. So if you're able to manipulate and to digitally recreate a fingerprint, you can get access into somebody's financial, their data. There's so much information you can get from them and actually screw up their lives significantly. But I have to admit that this is rather amazing, though. Even though this is, researchers have done this as a way to try to alert people, I still find this to be a rather amazing way to
for sure
recreate a fingerprint. I would have never thought that this is the way to do it, but researchers figured out this is the best way to do it. Now, what to do moving forward? People they're saying try to avoid swiping while using social media and try to use other ways to try to access your phone. I wouldn't recommend using like the Face ID or whatever Apple uses. That's something that you got to find something else, maybe a long password. It may be restrictive for you as a user, but think about it. If it's restricted for you as a user, it's going to be equally as restrictive for the person trying to hack into it. And I'll leave it at that.
Well, I am dying to know how exactly they did this.
They use, I don't know, they were using the microphone
like
to
sound. Yeah, exactly. Like this is insane that this can be done.
You know what? I'm wondering if you put a screen protector on, does that change?
Like muffle it or something?
Sound,
yeah.
Or even the thickness or the type of screen protector? Because you're talking about minute and very delicate sounds, and it could easily be changed simply by changing the thickness of the screen by putting on a screen protector. But also if you have a screen case in it or there's surrounding noise, there's going to be a lot of things.
Yeah, I should note that, like, I don't know what Android phones are doing these days. The last Android phone I had was a OnePlus 7 Pro, maybe, and it did have the in-screen fingerprint reader. My Pixel, I had a Pixel 5, was a fingerprint reader that was separate, so screen protector wouldn't catch it. The iPhones, same thing. The screen protector won't catch it. So that's what I mean. Like, how do you even avoid this? Like, these things are not generally baked into the actual like hardware glass. This is wild. Like, where else is this technology around that the microphones are so sensitive they can pick up the ridges on your thumb or your index finger or whatever and get the fingerprint? 9% of the time, the whole fingerprint can be reconstructed in their tests. That's insane. That's pretty good.
This is why I burned my fingerprints a long time ago, and not even my smartphone figures out who I am. It's just some nub.
I gotta start smoking and putting cigarettes out on my fingertips. I guess those two things save my personal information. Anyway, that's it for Access of Easy. Thanks for stopping by. If you enjoyed Access of Easy number 339, sign up for the newsletter, sign up for the YouTube channel, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, take care of yourselves.
Take care.